In 1986, 15 children boarded a yellow school bus for a spring field trip. They were laughing, carrying lunchboxes and disposable cameras, their faces pressed against the windows as they waved goodbye. By noon that day, the bus had vanished. No wreckage was ever found. No tracks on the dirt road leading to Morning Lake. No bodies, just silence. For 39 years, the case sat like a scar on Holstead County, a wound that never healed. And then, almost 4 decades later, a construction crew digging on private land unearthed something impossible. Buried deep beneath pine roots and clay soil, they struck yellow metal. It was the bus, but it wasn't crushed. It wasn't rusted. It looked as if time had swallowed it whole and then returned it in one piece. And when investigators opened the emergency door, what they found inside was worse than any empty grave. Before we begin, hit subscribe to uncover more of the stories they tried to bury, so no name is ever lost and no truth stays hidden. The fog over Morning Lake that morning clung to everything. It curled beneath the eaves of houses, smudged headlights on the county road, and muffled the sound of boots on gravel. By the time Sheriff Lana Whitaker pulled up to the site, the mist was so thick she could barely see the flashing lights of the deputy cars parked ahead. Lana cut the engine and sat for a moment in silence, her hand resting on the steering wheel. She knew what was waiting for her. The call had come less than an hour ago. Possible discovery related to Case 86071, the Holstead Ridge Elementary field trip disappearance. She had been 9 years old when the children vanished. She remembered their faces in the yearbook. She remembered the posters taped to store windows, the names whispered in her small town like prayers. And she remembered something else. She had been supposed to be on that bus, but chickenpox had kept her home. For 39 years, that small twist of fate gnawed at her, a secret guilt no one else could see. Now the bus had returned. She stepped out of her car, boots crunching the gravel, and pulled her coat tighter. The air smelled like damp earth and oil from the machinery, still parked in the clearing. A backhoe loomed over the site, its bucket raised like a claw frozen mid-strike. "Sheriff," a deputy called softly. Lana nodded and walked toward the caution tape. Beyond it, under harsh work lights, she saw the impossible sight, the bus, its yellow paint muted by layers of dirt, half buried, like a relic pulled from another world. The windows were dark, some cracked, others intact. The site foreman, a man with a hard hat tucked under his arm, stepped forward. His voice was low, almost reverent. "We were clearing space for a septic tank. The machine hit metal. We thought it was a tank, maybe an old car. Then we cleared more and saw the color." "Did you enter it?" Lana asked. The man shook his head. "We opened the emergency exit, just enough to look. Then we called you. Sheriff, you should see this for yourself." The words sank heavy. Lana drew a long breath, then ducked under the tape and walked toward the bus. Each step seemed to stretch longer. The silence pressing in on her ears, she reached the rear of the bus. The emergency exit door hung slightly ajar, mud clinging to the hinges. A sour, earthy smell seeped out, thick with mold and dust. Lana pulled on gloves, steadied herself, and stepped inside. Her boots creaked against the warped metal floor. The air was stale, suffocating. Seats lined both sides, cracked but intact, their green vinyl stiff with age. A few seatbelts were still buckled, their clasps corroded. On the floor of the third row sat a pink lunchbox, its cartoon rabbit decal faded but visible. Near the back step, a small sneaker lay sideways, coated in dried moss. But there were no bodies, no bones, not a single trace of human remains. And that made it worse. The emptiness screamed louder than anything else. At the front of the bus, something caught her eye. Taped to the dashboard was a single sheet of lined paper. The ink had bled slightly, but the handwriting was clear, neat, rounded letters listing 15 names. It was the class roster. At the bottom, in darker ink, scrawled over the teacher's careful loops, was a message. "We never made it to Morning Lake." Lana felt her breath catch. The words pulsed on the page like a wound reopened. Behind her, the deputy's voice trembled. "Sheriff, who would have written that?" Lana didn't answer. Her eyes stayed fixed on the words, her mind dragging her backward, back to that day in 1986, when she'd sat at home with fever while her classmates climbed aboard this very bus. She had seen their smiles in the yearbook. heard their voices echo in the hallways. And now, standing in the stale dark of the unearthed bus, she realized something she had never dared think before. Whatever had taken them hadn't been an accident. The bus hadn't been lost. It had been buried. Deliberately. And someone, somewhere, had wanted this secret to stay hidden forever. Lana turned and stepped back into the cold morning air, the message still burning in her mind. She looked at the foreman, her face pale but steady. "Seal off this site. No one touches the bus, not until the state team gets here." The man nodded, eyes wide. As Lana walked back to her car, she felt the weight of the woods pressing down around her. The pines stood like sentinels, silent and watchful. Their roots wrapped around the buried years. 39 years of silence had ended, and with it, the beginning of something she was no longer sure she wanted to uncover. Somewhere behind her, a crow called from the trees. The sound was sharp, cutting through the fog like a warning. Lana stopped, her breath clouding in the cold, and for the first time in decades, she whispered the names of her classmates, one by one, as if saying them aloud might keep their ghosts at bay. But deep down, she knew the truth. Their story was only beginning. Sheriff Lana Whitaker didn't sleep that night. She sat at her kitchen table, coffee growing cold in the mug beside her, the lined paper from the bus sealed in an evidence bag at her elbow. Her house was quiet, except for the hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of old wood. But inside her head, it was anything but quiet. 15 names written in a teacher's handwriting. 15 children who had climbed aboard that bus in 1986 and never stepped off. And below them, that chilling message, "We never made it to Morning Lake." Lana rubbed her temples, her mind racing. Who had written it? The teacher? One of the children? Someone else entirely? And if they hadn't made it to the lake, then where had they gone? She thought of her own childhood room, where a get-well-soon balloon had hovered in the corner while she lay feverish in bed, angry at missing the field trip. That balloon had long since deflated and vanished, but she was still here. She was alive. Her classmates weren't. The weight of survivor's guilt pressed harder than ever. By dawn, Lana was back at the site. State investigators had already swarmed it, photographing, measuring, logging every inch of the unearthed bus. The air was thick with exhaust from generators powering floodlights, even though the sun was climbing. "Sheriff," a man in a dark suit called, extending his hand. "Agent Crowley, FBI, will be working this case jointly." Crowley had the kind of face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. Sharp cheekbones, a permanent furrow in his brow. He wasn't here for comfort, he was here for answers. Lana shook his hand, her eyes flicking past him to the forensic team clustered near the bus. One woman carefully lifted the pink lunchbox into an evidence bag. Another brushed soil from a sneaker sole. "What about prints, DNA?" Lana asked. Crowley exhaled through his nose, almost a laugh. "Sheriff, the odds of viable evidence surviving 39 years underground are slim. We'll try, but I wouldn't hold my breath." Lana folded her arms. "Then we'd better find something else." The two walked toward the clearing's edge, where the earth had been freshly dug. Lana crouched, touching the soil. It wasn't just burial, it was careful burial. The bus had been lowered, covered, concealed. "Why bury it?" Lana asked aloud. "If it was an accident, why hide it?" Crowley's gaze lingered on the tree line. Maybe whoever did it didn't want the children to be found. The words hung heavy. Later that morning, a retired deputy named Carl Givens arrived at the site. His hair was white now, his steps slower, but his eyes were sharp with memories that had never dulled. "I was 26 when those kids went missing," Carl said. Whole county was torn apart. "We searched every inch of land between Holstead and Morning Lake. Dogs, helicopters, volunteers, hundreds of us. Nothing. It was like the earth swallowed them." He leaned closer to Lana, his voice dropping. "We always suspected someone helped that bus disappear, but we couldn't prove a thing." Lana studied him. "What made you suspect that?" Carl hesitated, then sighed. "Because the driver wasn't just a driver. He was new. No one in town really knew him. Name was Harold Brinks. Hired on a week before the field trip. Seemed quiet, polite, too polite. After the bus vanished, so did every trace of him. His personnel file, his references, like he never existed." The name sent a shiver down Lana's spine. She had almost forgotten the face in the yearbook, the tall, thin man with dark hair combed flat, standing awkwardly beside the smiling children. Harold Brinks, the ghost driver. Why wasn't this followed up? She asked. Carl's jaw tightened. Orders came down from above to focus on the lake. Brinks was never named a suspect. Don't ask me why. Lana felt her pulse quicken. 39 years later, the silence around Harold Brinks felt louder than ever. By afternoon, Lana drove into town, the roads familiar yet shadowed by the weight of the past. She parked outside Holstead Ridge Elementary, now abandoned, its windows boarded, paint peeling in strips. Inside, the hallways smelled of mildew and dust. Faded murals of smiling suns and animals lined the walls, ghosts of children's laughter still trapped in the air. She found the old library, its shelves bare. In the back corner, where the records were once kept, she pried open a rusted filing cabinet. Most folders were eaten by mold, but one envelope remained, tucked deep in the back. On the tab, written in neat marker, were the words, "Field Trip, April 14th, 1986. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were photocopies of permission slips. Each bore a parent's signature, the child's name carefully printed. 15 in total. At the bottom of each was the same detail, driver, Harold Brinks, and stapled to the back was a single sheet of lined paper, brittle with age. It was a note. If anything happens, it was him. Please believe me. No name, no signature, just those words. Lana felt the blood drain from her face. She slipped the paper into her folder and pressed it to her chest, the walls of the empty school seeming to close in. This wasn't an accident. It had never been an accident. Somewhere between Holstead Ridge and Morning Lake, a stranger had driven 15 children into the unknown. And now, 39 years later, the earth had given back their bus, but not their bodies. Halfway through the hall, her phone buzzed. It was Crowley. "Sheriff, you need to get back here. We found something under the bus." Her stomach dropped. "What?" Crowley's voice was tight. "Another box. Metal. Buried beneath the frame. You'll want to see it yourself." Lana was already running to her car, gravel spitting under her tires as she sped back toward the site. By the time she arrived, agents were clustered around a rectangular container pulled from the soil. Its surface was rusted, its corners sharp. Crowley gestured. "We cut the lock. It's unusual." Lana crouched beside the box as an agent lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in decaying cloth, lay dozens of small objects. She leaned closer, heart thundering. A baseball glove, a hair ribbon, a pair of glasses with one lens cracked. 15 items in total, belongings of children, laid to rest like offerings. And in the very center of the box, sitting on top of the cloth, was a photograph. Black and white, slightly blurred. It showed the 15 children lined up in front of the bus on the morning of the trip. They were smiling, some holding lunchboxes, others waving. And behind them, standing stiffly at the wheel well, was Harold Brinks. His face was clear, his eyes sharp. But what made Lana's stomach twist was his smile. It was wrong. Too wide, too knowing. As if he already understood none of those children would ever return home. The photograph slipped in her hand as her pulse hammered in her ears. For 39 years, Holstead County had lived with silence. Now, at last, the truth was clawing its way back to the surface, and Harold Brinks' name was about to return with it. Before we continue, don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss the hidden stories waiting to be unearthed. Every name matters. Every silence deserves to be broken. The photograph burned in Lana's mind long after she left the site. She drove home with the copy sealed in a folder beside her, her headlights cutting through the fog that clung to the road like old ghosts. The children's faces, bright, smiling, unaware, haunted her rearview mirror. And behind them, Brinks' fixed grin, the kind of expression that belonged not to a man but to a mask. Lana pulled into her driveway and sat motionless in the car. For the first time since the bus had been found, she was afraid. Not for herself, but for the possibility that Brinks' shadow had never really left Holstead County. Inside, she spread the evidence across her dining table. The permission slips, the anonymous note, the photograph, 15 names written in innocent cursive, and one name that had no roots, Harold Brinks, the man who had stepped into their lives and erased them. She needed to know who he was. The county courthouse was quiet the next morning, dust motes swirling in shafts of light as Lana unlocked the archive room. She pulled microfilm reels, birth records, employment logs. Nothing. Brink's file began and ended in the spring of 1986. No history, no address, no relatives. Even the social security number listed on his employment papers was a phantom. It didn't exist in state records. It was as though he had been invented. By noon, she was on the phone with Crowley. "I ran his name through bureau systems," he said. "Came up dry. No Harold Brinks fitting his description before 86. And after the disappearance, total silence." "Someone scrubbed him," Lana muttered. "Or he scrubbed himself," Crowley replied. Which raises the question, how did a man with no past get hired to drive a school bus full of children? Lana pinched the bridge of her nose. Someone vouched for him. That afternoon, she tracked down the only surviving administrator from Holstead Ridge Elementary, a frail woman named Marjorie Bell, now 91 and living in a nursing home. Marjorie's eyes were clouded, her voice a papery whisper. But when Lana placed the photograph in her lap, something sparked in her memory. "Yes, I remember him," Marjorie said slowly. "He was polite, very polite, to Wyatt. The superintendent said he came highly recommended." "By who?" Lana pressed. Marjorie's brow furrowed. "A church group, I think. They said he was safe, God-fearing. They told us we were lucky to have him." Her hands trembled as she pushed the photo back. "But the moment those children vanished, I knew it had been a lie." A church group. Lana drove straight to the county library and dug through newspapers from the mid-1980s. In the spring of 86, just weeks before the disappearance, there had been a new congregation forming outside Holstead, the Children of the Covenant, a fringe sect led by a preacher named Elias Venn. The article described Venn as charismatic, reclusive, and devoted to the belief that children were the purest vessels of divine truth. Her stomach nodded. Children. She turned the page. One photo, grainy but clear enough, showed Elias Venn standing outside a tent revival, hand raised. Behind him were several men in plain suits. One of them looked almost exactly like Harold Brinks. Her heart skipped. It wasn't proof, but it was enough. By the time she reached the FBI field office, Crowley already had a stack of files waiting. "The Children of the Covenant," he said grimly, flipping one open. They started popping up in small towns in the late 70s, preached about sacrifice, purity, and rebirth. Rumors of disappearances around their gatherings, but nothing ever stuck. Disbanded in 87 after a raid on their compound, Venn disappeared, never resurfaced. He slid another folder across the table. "Take a look at this." Inside were mugshots, grainy, black and white, members of the sect who had been arrested in the raid. And there, in the second row, was a familiar face, Harold Brinks, except the file listed a different name, David Harlan, a convicted fraudster who had skipped parole in 1985. Lana stared at the photo, bile rising in her throat. "Brinks wasn't real," she whispered. "He was Harlan. He hid inside the sect, and they helped him become the bus driver." Crowley nodded. "And then, 39 years ago, he vanished along with the children." Lana's hands trembled. She thought of the anonymous note tucked into the permission slips. If anything happens, it was him. Someone had tried to warn them, but no one had listened. That night, Lana sat in her darkened living room, staring at the photograph of the children lined up in front of the bus. She traced each face with her finger, whispering their names. Emmett, Grace, Laura, Tyler. 15 voices silenced, and a predator who had hidden behind the mask of a driver for 39 years. The county had treated it like an unsolved tragedy, but Lana knew better now. It had been murder. Halfway through the silence, her phone buzzed. It was Crowley again. "We got something from the box," he said. Her pulse quickened. "What?" "One of the cloths. Stained. DNA analysis is early, but it doesn't match the children. It's adult. Male." Lana gripped the phone tighter. "You're telling me Harlan bled at the scene?" "That's what it looks like." For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. If Harlan had been injured, Maybe someone had fought back. Maybe there was more to the story than a clean disappearance. The next day, she and Crowley followed the trail deeper. Old case files, witness interviews, newspaper clippings long buried. One article stopped Lana cold. Local farmer reports strange sightings near Morning Lake, April 1986. The farmer, a man named William Drexler, had told reporters he'd seen a bus driving down a service road that didn't lead to the camp, a bus with its lights off, swallowed by fog. He had called the sheriff's office, and the report had been logged, but nothing had been done. Lana's hands clenched. They ignored it. Crowley's voice was flat, or they covered it up. That evening, Lana drove to Drexler's old property. The farmhouse was abandoned, windows boarded, roof sagging, but behind it stretched acres of woods leading straight toward Morning Lake. She walked the path slowly, her flashlight beam slicing through the dusk. Branches clawed at her jacket, the silence pressing heavy. Half a mile in, she found it, a clearing she didn't remember from childhood. The earth here was uneven, like it had been dug and filled long ago. Her chest tightened. Another burial site? She marked the coordinates and radioed them in. But as she turned to leave, something caught her eye. Nailed to a tree at the clearing's edge was a strip of wood, weathered nearly to nothing. Carved into its surface, barely visible, were two words: "Forgive us." Lana's throat closed. She staggered back, the words searing into her vision. Someone had been here, someone connected to the disappearance, and they hadn't asked for justice. They had begged for forgiveness. Before we go further, make sure you've subscribed. Stories like this hide in silence for decades. And the only way they're remembered is if we refuse to let them die. Every forgotten name deserves to be spoken again. The woods were quieter than they should have been. When Lana returned with a forensic team the next morning, the air was sharp with frost, and the clearing looked almost ordinary in the early light. The carved words, "Forgive us," had grown darker overnight, as though the wood itself wanted the message remembered. The team marked the site for excavation, but Crowley pulled Lana aside before the work began. "You're not going to believe this," he said, holding up a folder. I pulled an old social services file from '86. A foster boy named Caleb Rudd. He lived just 2 miles from Morning Lake back then. Guess what? He gave a statement the week after the kids vanished. "What kind of statement?" Lana asked, pulse quickening. Crowley flipped open the folder. He said he saw a bus, at night, parked at the edge of the lake. He told deputies he heard children crying. Lana froze. And? Crowley's jaw tightened. And the report says the boy was dismissed as unreliable. Case closed. Her hands curled into fists. 39 years wasted because someone didn't want to believe a frightened kid. "Where is he now?" she asked. Crowley tapped the folder. Still in Holstead County, he never left. By afternoon, they were driving down a cracked rural road, passing fields gone fallow. Caleb Rudd lived in a weather-beaten trailer on the edge of the tree line, a scatter of rusted cars in the yard. He answered their knocks slowly. A man in his 50s now, wiry and hollow-eyed, his hair streaked with gray. Suspicion hung over him like a cloak. "You're wasting your time," Caleb muttered when they introduced themselves. "Nobody wanted to hear me back then. Why would they now?" Lana held out the photograph. The children, the bus, the driver. Something in his face changed. "They're still talking about it," he whispered. "Yes," Lana said gently. "And we need your help. Tell us what you saw." Caleb's hands trembled as he motioned them inside. The trailer smelled of old wood smoke and dust, the blinds drawn tight. "I was 12, he began, voice raw. "That night I couldn't sleep. Went out walking like I always did when things got bad at home. I heard an engine out by the lake. Figured it was poachers, but when I got closer, I saw a bus, yellow, lights off, parked crooked on the dirt." He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the window as though the past still hunted him. "I crept close enough to see shadows moving inside, and I heard them, kids, crying, begging, a man's voice shouting, then singing, some kind of hymn." Lana's blood ran cold. "What happened next?" Crowley asked. Caleb shook his head. "I was too scared. I ran. Told the deputies the next morning. They laughed, said I made it up. Said I wanted attention." His voice cracked. "But I didn't. I swear I didn't. Lana leaned forward. Did you see the driver? Caleb hesitated, then nodded. Just a glimpse. A tall man with glasses. Smile that didn't reach his eyes. Looked like a preacher. Lana slid the photo across the table again, her finger pointing at Harold Brinks. Caleb flinched. That's him, he whispered. That's the man at the lake. The trailer fell silent. Crowley closed the folder with a soft snap. You realize what this means. The kids never made it to the camp. They were taken here, to the lake. And the sheriff's office buried the statement of the only witness. Caleb's eyes were wide, haunted. I've carried that night my whole life. Nobody believed me. But you do, don't you? We do, Lana said firmly. And we're going to prove it. They left with more questions than answers. But for the first time, they had a living voice tying the bus to the sect. That evening, back at her house, Lana spread the evidence across her table again. Caleb's testimony, the photograph, the anonymous note, the carved words on the tree. A picture was beginning to form. The children of the covenant hadn't just disappeared. They had taken children, 15 of them, and buried the truth in the woods. But why? She thought of Elias Venn, the preacher who vanished after the raid. If he had been willing to sacrifice children for his beliefs, then Holstead's tragedy wasn't an accident. It was ritual. Her phone buzzed. It was Crowley. His voice was tight, urgent. We found something in the clearing. Lana's stomach dropped. What is it? A second burial pit. Smaller. Shallow. She gripped the phone tighter. Bodies? Not human, he said. Animals, deer, dogs, burned, arranged in a circle. Lana closed her eyes. The hymn Caleb had described. The message on the tree. Forgive us. The children hadn't been lost. They had been taken into something dark, something rehearsed. That night, sleep didn't come. She sat at her table until dawn, the children's names on her lips. Emmett, Grace, Laura, Tyler. Names that deserved justice. By morning, she knew what she had to do. There was one place left untouched. The camp road. The very path the bus should have taken. If the sect had staged everything near Morning Lake, maybe there were traces left behind. She and Crowley drove out together, the tires crunching over gravel. The service road was overgrown, the cabins long since collapsed, but the earth remembered what men had tried to hide. Half a mile in, Crowley stopped the car. Look at that. The trees opened to reveal a clearing. In the center stood an old chapel, half collapsed, hidden by decades of neglect. The wood was blackened as though it had burned and then been abandoned. A chapel. Lana's chest tightened. This was theirs. They pushed open the door. Dust and rot filled the air. The pews were broken, the altar charred, but carved into the back wall were words that had survived the fire. The children are the offering. Lana staggered back, her pulse hammering in her ears. Crowley's face was pale. This wasn't just a cult, it was a ritual site. And then Lana saw it, half buried beneath debris at the base of the altar. A small, rusted lunchbox. She knelt, brushing dirt from its lid. Painted letters spelled a name in fading marker. Grace. Her throat closed. One of the missing children. She lifted it carefully, her hands shaking. Inside, wrapped in plastic gone brittle with age, was a folded piece of paper. She opened it slowly. The handwriting was small, desperate. They said we wouldn't go home. They said we were chosen. If anyone finds this, please, don't let them take us into the lake. Lana's vision blurred with tears. The children had known. They had tried to leave behind a message. She looked at Crowley, her voice trembling. They weren't just taken, they were prepared. And the lake. Her words trailed off, because outside, through the broken doorway of the chapel, the water of Morning Lake glimmered in the distance. And Lana knew, whatever happened that night, the answer still waited beneath its surface. Before we go further, if this story grips you the way it grips me, hit subscribe now. These aren't just tales, they're the echoes of lives stolen, voices silenced, and the only way to bring them back is to keep their names alive. The water of Morning Lake was black that night. Even by day, the lake had always carried a stillness that felt wrong. Locals said it never froze, even in the coldest winters, and that sometimes If you stood at its shore, you could hear whispers under the surface. Most folks chalked it up to wind or fish or imagination. But Lana Whitaker knew better now. Standing at the bank with Crowley beside her, she felt the weight of every missing child pressing down on the dark ripples. 39 years of silence. 39 years of lies. And now the truth was rising like a ghost from the water. The state forensic team had cordoned off the clearing behind them. Evidence markers dotted the charred chapel, the lunchbox now cataloged and photographed. But Lana hadn't been able to let it go. "Don't let them take us into the lake." The words were still etched in her mind, desperate as a scream. Crowley broke the silence first. "We need sonar, divers, maybe dredging equipment. This is beyond us, Lana." She shook her head. "We can't wait. If the cult used this place, if they put something in the water." Her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish. Both of them knew what might be waiting under the surface. Crowley muttered, "God help us," and followed her down the slope. The shoreline mud sucked at their boots. The reeds rattled in the breeze. Lana's flashlight beam cut across the water, and something pale flickered beneath the surface, then vanished. Her chest tightened. "Did you see that?" Crowley's jaw tightened. "Yeah, could have been a fish." But they both knew it wasn't. They found an old dock, rotting but still standing. The boards groaned as they stepped onto it, water lapping against the posts. Lana crouched and shone her light into the depths. Shapes moved below, not fish, not debris, something arranged, circular. Crowley swore under his breath, "That's no accident." And then, as if the lake itself wanted to answer, the water shifted. A ripple widened across the surface. Though no wind blew, Lana's breath caught. A figure was rising. At first, it looked like a shadow, long and slender, moving upward in slow motion. Then the water broke, and the figure of a man emerged, soaked clothes clinging to a skeletal frame, hair plastered to his skull, glasses crooked but still clinging to his face. Harold Brinks. The bus driver. Crowley staggered back, nearly slipping on the dock. No, that's impossible. He's been gone 39 years. Brinks lifted his head. His lips curled in a smile that didn't belong on any living man. Water streamed from his mouth as he spoke in a rasp that carried across the still lake. "They are not gone," he whispered. "They are waiting." Lana froze, her heart hammering so hard she thought her chest would split. The driver's eyes glowed faintly in the beam of her flashlight. Not alive, not dead, something else. "Where are they?" Lana forced the words through trembling lips. "Where are the children?" Brinks tilted his head, his smile widening. "In the water," he said softly. "The offering never ends." And then, before they could move, before they could draw another breath, a dozen pale hands broke the surface all around the dock. Small hands, children's hands, fingers grasping, reaching, pulling at the wood. The sound of water slapping against the posts grew frantic, like dozens of bodies pressing upward from below. Lana stumbled back, her light catching faces just beneath the surface. Faces of children, wide-eyed and pale, mouths moving soundlessly in the dark water. Crowley shouted, "Lana, we have to go." But she couldn't move. Her gaze was locked on Grace, the same girl from the yearbook photo, the same name scrawled on the lunchbox. Her small face stared up at Lana from beneath the rippling water, lips forming a word. "Help." The dock shuddered, boards cracked. Water splashed up cold as ice, drenching Lana's legs. Brinks raised his arms, as though commanding a choir. His voice thundered, though his mouth barely moved. They belonged to the Covenant. They belonged to the lake. And soon, the rest was drowned out by the sound of the dock splintering. Lana and Crowley leapt back, just as the boards collapsed, swallowed by the rising hands. For a moment, the water churned violently, then stilled. The dock was gone, and so was Harold Brinks. The surface lay flat again, mirror-like, reflecting the pale moon. Lana staggered to her knees, gasping, her flashlight clattering to the mud. Crowley gripped her shoulder, his face white as bone. "You saw it," she whispered. "Tell me you saw it." Crowley's voice was hoarse. "We both did." They sat in silence, the night pressing down. the woods holding its breath. Then Lana's phone buzzed in her pocket. Hands shaking, she pulled it free. An unknown number. She answered with a trembling, "Hello?" A child's voice came through, faint, distorted. "Sheriff Whitaker, we're still here." The line went dead. Lana stared at the phone, her blood running cold. The children were gone, and yet they weren't. Lana Whitaker sat in her cruiser, staring at the black screen of her phone. Her knuckles whitened as she gripped it. But the call log showed nothing, no record of an incoming number, no trace that anyone had spoken to her. And yet she could still hear the voice. "Sheriff Whitaker, we're still here." Crowley sat beside her, equally shaken. His shirt was damp from the spray of the collapsing dock, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, as though expecting pale hands to claw through the back window. Finally, he broke the silence. "We should call this in. Every agency, every federal contact I've got. This is way beyond us." Lana shook her head. "And tell them what? That the missing kids of 1986 just tried to drag us into the lake? That their driver climbed out of the water after 39 years? You know how that'll sound?" Crowley scrubbed his face with both hands. "It'll sound insane, but it's the truth." "No," Lana said firmly. "The truth isn't what gets heard. It's what gets believed. And no one is going to believe this." The words hung heavy in the cab. Outside, the woods creaked and shifted in the wind, every branch like a finger scratching at the dark. Lana turned the key, the engine rumbling to life. She pulled away from the lake, the headlights carving through the trees, but the unease followed them, clinging like the cold spray still damp on her skin. Halfway down the service road, Crowley reached into his jacket and pulled out a plastic evidence bag. Inside was the page torn from the old field trip permission slip, the one Lana had found in the archive box, the one with Grace Miller's scrawled handwriting. "Don't let them take us into the lake." He held it between them. She knew, she warned someone, and nobody listened. Lana's grip tightened on the wheel. "We're listening now." Crowley looked at her sharply. "Meaning what?" "Meaning we don't hand this over to the feds. Not yet. Not until we know what we're dealing with." He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. "This is going to kill us, Lana." Her eyes didn't leave the road. "Or, it's the only way we find them." The rest of the drive passed in silence. By dawn, the clearing near Morning Lake was crawling with law enforcement. Search boats skimmed across the surface, sonar equipment lowering into the depths. Divers slipped into wetsuits. But Lana kept her distance. She and Crowley stood at the tree line, watching as the professionals descended on the site. Hours passed, and then one of the divers surfaced, shouting for a line. A crowd gathered as something was hauled from the water. Something long, rusted, and twisted, the frame of a school bus. Gasps rose from the watching officers. Camera shutters snapped. Someone cursed under their breath. Lana felt her knees weaken. The bus was half-rotted, its paint eaten away, but the outline was unmistakable. Crowley whispered, "That's it. That's their bus." The divers confirmed what Lana already knew. No bodies were found inside, no remains, only a hollow, rusted shell, which meant the children hadn't been lost to an accident. They had been taken. As the divers pulled the wreckage toward shore, Lana noticed something strange. Symbols etched into the metal, visible even through the corrosion. Circles, lines, interlocking shapes like runes. Not factory markings, not graffiti. Deliberate. Crowley leaned close, his voice low. "Those are ritual symbols." Lana's mouth was dry. "You've seen them before?" He hesitated. "Once. On a case that never made it to the press. A cult out west. They called themselves the Servants of the Offering." "Same symbols." Her stomach dropped. "And what happened to them?" Crowley's expression darkened. "They disappeared. Whole compound abandoned overnight. Never found a trace." The lake rippled. The bus groaned as it was dragged free, as though the water didn't want to give it up. That night, Lana sat at her kitchen table, staring at a spread of photographs, yearbook pages, newspaper clippings, evidence shots of the bus. Her phone buzzed. A text from Crowley. "Need to show you something. Not safe on the phone. Meet me at the archives. Midnight." She glanced at the clock. 11:37. With a weary sigh, she grabbed her keys. The archives were housed in the old county courthouse, a red brick relic with creaking floors and yellowed walls. By the time Lana arrived, the building was dark, the only light spilling from the basement window. She descended the stairs, her boots echoing. Crowley was waiting at a long oak table, files spread in front of him. His face was grave. He pushed a folder toward her. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, black and white images from the 1950s, children standing in front of the very same bus, teachers smiling stiffly beside them. Her brow furrowed. These kids, who are they? Crowley's jaw tightened. That's the part that'll make your skin crawl. They're not from 86. These photos are from 56, 30 years earlier. Lana blinked, her heart skipping. The same bus? He nodded. And the same names. Grace Miller, Thomas Green, Charlotte Hayes. The entire passenger list, identical. 30 years apart. Her blood ran cold. "What are you saying?" she whispered. "I'm saying this isn't the first time. It's a pattern. Every 30 years, same bus, same names, same children." Lana staggered back, her mind spinning. Before she could speak, a sound echoed down the hallway outside. A shuffle of footsteps, a creak of floorboards. Crowley's eyes snapped to the door. Lana drew her weapon. The footsteps grew louder, closer. And then a figure appeared in the doorway. A woman, tall and gaunt, with stringy hair and eyes that burned with something feverish. She wore a long coat, dripping with lake water. Her lips curled into a smile that made Lana's skin crawl. "You shouldn't have come here," the woman said softly. "The offering is not finished." The woman's eyes glimmered in the dim basement light, her wet coat dripping onto the stone floor. Each drop echoed like a ticking clock, counting down to something Lana couldn't yet see. Crowley stepped forward, his voice steady but laced with steel. "Who are you?" The woman tilted her head, almost amused. "Names don't matter. Not anymore. I am what remains when everyone else is gone. I am the keeper." Lana kept her gun trained on her. "Keeper of what?" The smile widened, cracked and raw. "Of the covenant, of the offering, of the children who never left." The words hit Lana like a blow. Her finger twitched against the trigger. "You were part of this." The woman's laugh was brittle. "Part? No. Bound. Bound to carry the weight when others failed. They called it a sacred duty. I call it a curse." She moved closer, slow and deliberate, her eyes never leaving Lana's. "You don't understand. You can't. Those children, they were chosen, not once, but again and again. The offering renews itself every cycle. Names repeat, faces return. The lake takes them, and in return, the rest of us live." Crowley swore under his breath. "That's impossible. Reincarnation?" The woman's gaze flicked toward him. Not rebirth, not souls, patterns. The world binds itself in loops, and the covenant learned to ride them. Every 30 years, the same children appear. Not the same bodies, no, but the same names, the same roles, chosen without ever knowing. Lana's voice was hoarse. "You're saying the kids in 1956, the kids in 1986, they weren't accidents. They were sacrifices." The woman's smile faded. "They were necessary." Lana's hand trembled on the gun. Rage burned through her veins. "They were children." The keeper's eyes softened, just slightly. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't hear them still? They don't scream anymore. They whisper. In the water, in the walls of this town." Crowley glanced at Lana, his face pale. "Why tell us this now?" The keeper leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Because the cycle is almost due. You've stirred the lake, you've broken the seal, and now the offering will demand its due again." Lana's heart slammed in her chest. "When?" The woman's lips curved into that eerie smile again. "Soon, sooner than you think. The new names are already written." Before Lana could press further, a sound pierced the basement, a high-pitched whine of static. It came from the police radio, clicked to her belt. She froze. The static crackled, then gave way to a voice. A child's voice. "Sheriff Whitaker, it's dark. We're waiting." Lana staggered back, nearly dropping the radio. Crowley grabbed it. his knuckles white. "Who is this? Identify yourself." But only static answered. When the sound died, the basement was heavy with silence. The keeper's eyes glowed with grim satisfaction. "They're calling for you now, just as they called for me." Lana snapped the radio off, her chest heaving. "Why me? Why now?" The woman stepped back, melting into the shadows near the shelves of dusty files. "Because Sheriff Whitaker, you were spared once. Homesick with chickenpox, remember? The offering passed you by. But it never forgets. And now it's come to collect." Her form blurred in the half-light. By the time Lana raised her weapon again, the woman was gone, leaving only wet footprints across the floor. Later that night, Lana sat in her cruiser outside the old courthouse, her pulse refusing to slow. Crowley leaned against the hood, chain-smoking one cigarette after another, his face a mask of exhaustion. Finally, he said, "We need to find the next names." Lana looked at him. "How?" He gestured toward the building. "If what she said is true, there will be a list, records, something. If it's a pattern, it'll be written down." Lana exhaled. "And if we find them? Then maybe we can stop it before it starts." She stared into the trees, the darkness pressing in. Every rustle of branches sounded like footsteps. Every flicker of shadow like a child darting out of view. "Then we start now," she whispered. The next day, they tore through the archives. Boxes of school rosters, attendance sheets, yearbooks stacked high, smelling of mildew and dust. Hours bled into each other, until Lana finally froze, her finger tracing down a page, a roster dated 2016. Her stomach dropped. There they were, Grace Miller, Thomas Green, Charlotte Hayes. The same names, again. She flipped through the years after, 2017, 2018, 2019. Each year, the names were there. Always the same cluster of children, shuffled between classes, growing older, but still marked. Crowley leaned over her shoulder, his face hard. The cycle didn't stop in 86. Lana's throat tightened. It's happening again, right now. And then her phone buzzed. A text message, no number, no sender, just one line. "You have 7 days." Lana's blood went cold. Crowley read the screen over her shoulder. His voice was low. "They're giving us a deadline." The room seemed to tilt. The boxes of files swayed. Lana gripped the table, forcing herself to breathe. 7 days. 7 days until the offering, and she had no idea how to stop it. If you're gripped by this story, don't forget to subscribe now. You won't want to miss what happens when the offering's countdown begins. The message wouldn't leave Lana's mind. "You have 7 days." It looped through her thoughts like a curse, beating in rhythm with her pulse. She could still hear the keeper's words from the basement. The offering renews itself every cycle. And now she knew exactly what that meant. Crowley broke the silence first, his voice rough. "We need to put eyes on those kids, now. If there's a list, then they're walking around this town like nothing's wrong." Lana nodded, though her hands trembled. If the Covenant knows we're onto them, they won't wait. They'll move faster. Crowley leaned closer, lowering his voice even though they were alone in the archive room. "Sheriff, listen to me. You have authority. Deputies, school officials, hell, even state resources if you call it in. We need protection on those names." Lana's stomach turned. She could see the headlines already. "Sheriff claims curse threatens children of Holstead County." The town already treated her like she was clinging too hard to a ghost story. Going public now might just drive those kids closer into danger. "We'll do this quiet," she said. "No panic, no media, just you and me for now." Crowley swore, but he didn't argue. By noon the next day, Lana had the first files spread across her desk. Student records, photos clipped from yearbooks, attendance sheets. Grace Miller, 10 years old, brown hair, sharp smile, straight A student. Thomas Green, 11, wore glasses too big for his face, shy, soft-spoken. Charlotte Hayes, 10, tall for her age, fond of sketching in the margins of her papers. And there were more. The same cluster of children, their names repeating across decades. Always the offering, always chosen. Crowley tapped the folder with a thick finger. If the covenant's pattern holds, these kids are in danger before the week is out. Lana rubbed her temples. We need to talk to their families. But the words had barely left her mouth when her office door creaked open. Deputy Mendez poked his head in. Sheriff, you might want to take this call. Parent says her daughter never came home from school yesterday. Lana's chest tightened. What's her name? Mendez glanced at his notepad. Charlotte Hayes. The interview with Mrs. Hayes was gutting. The woman sat rigid on her floral couch, twisting a damp tissue in her hands. She always calls if she's late. Always. I went by the school, but they said she signed out with her teacher. After that, nothing. Lana forced her voice to stay calm. Do you know which teacher? Mr. Holloway. He said she was supposed to go home with a classmate's family. But when I called that family, they said they hadn't seen her. Lana exchanged a look with Crowley. Her gut churned. Mrs. Hayes, she said gently, do you remember if anyone strange had been around lately? Anyone asking about Charlotte? The woman shook her head, tears brimming. No one. Just the church ladies who come by with their casseroles. They said they were praying for her health. But she wasn't sick. The words stabbed Lana like ice. The covenant had always cloaked itself in piety, in charity. Church ladies with casseroles. She could see them now, smiles too wide, eyes too cold, watching, marking, preparing. Crowley leaned close, murmuring so only Lana could hear. They already have her. That night, Lana drove the back roads of Holstead County with Crowley riding shotgun, their headlights cutting through the fog. The town looked the same as it had in her childhood. Quiet porches, sagging barns, fields lying fallow under the moon. But it felt different now. Predatory. Charlotte's not the first, Crowley said finally, his voice low. You've got reports buried in those files. Kids who ran away, families who moved suddenly. All cover stories. The cycle's been alive all along. Lana gripped the wheel until her knuckles whitened. We're breaking it. This time it ends. Crowley glanced at her, his face shadowed. You realize what you're saying. The covenant's been here for decades, maybe longer. It's not just a group, it's the bones of this place, the families, the church, the land itself. If you go after it, you'll be going after your own people. Lana's voice was steel. Then I guess it's about time someone did. The following morning, they split the list of names and began their visits. Grace Miller's parents were polite but guarded, their smiles brittle. When Lana pressed for details, they bristled. She's fine, Mr. Miller said flatly. We take care of our own. Thomas Green's mother refused to even open the door, her voice muffled through the wood. We don't want your interference, Sheriff. Please leave us alone. Everywhere they went, the same resistance. Families that should have been terrified instead acted like guardians of a secret. By the time the sun set, Lana and Crowley sat in the cruiser, drained and uneasy. They're in on it, Crowley said at last. The parents, maybe not all of them, but enough. They've accepted the covenant. They'll hand their kids over to keep the cycle alive. Lana's throat tightened. Then they're not just victims, they're participants. And then her phone buzzed again, another message. This time a photo. Charlotte Hayes, alive, eyes wide, cheeks tear-streaked, gag tied across her mouth. The background was dark, but Lana could just make out wooden beams, rough and splintered. A barn. The caption read, 6 remain. Lana's stomach dropped. She shoved the phone at Crowley. He swore under his breath. They're taunting us. They want us to know the countdown's already started. Lana's hands shook as she started the engine. Then we find her. Now. But in her gut, she knew this was only the beginning. If Charlotte was the first, the covenant would take the others one by one. And Lana had only 7 days to stop them. The barn crouched at the edge of the tree line like a sleeping beast, its roof sagging, its boards gray with rot. The air smelled of wet earth and rusted iron. Crickets went silent as Lana's cruiser headlights cut across the field, painting the barn in harsh beams. Crowley killed the engine. Silence swallowed them. You think this is it? He asked. Lana gripped her phone tighter. The image of Charlotte's terrified face burned into her mind. It has to be. They stepped into the night. The field grass whispered against their boots. The barn loomed larger with each step, its doors chained shut with a length of rusted steel. Crowley scanned the area, his flashlight flickering across the trees. Too quiet. Lana drew her sidearm. Then we make it quick. Crowley produced a pair of bolt cutters from the trunk, something he'd insisted on bringing. The steel chain groaned and snapped under the pressure. The doors creaked open. Inside, darkness swallowed the beam of their flashlights. Dust floated thick in the air. Broken tools leaned against the walls. Hay rotted in piles. "Charlotte?" Lana's voice echoed. For a moment, only silence. Then a sound. Soft, muffled, a whimper. Crowley swung his light toward the far corner. A figure hunched against the beams. Small, thin wrists bound with rope. "Charlotte?" Lana breathed. They rushed to her, Crowley cutting the bindings while Lana pulled the gag free. Charlotte gasped, tears streaking down her dirt-stained cheeks. They said you wouldn't come," she whispered, voice trembling. "You're safe now," Lana said, wrapping her arms around the girl. "We've got you." But Charlotte shook her head, eyes wide with terror. "No, you don't understand. They said this was just the beginning." They hurried her back to the cruiser. Lana kept glancing over her shoulder, the barn looming darker with every step. Crowley slid Charlotte into the back seat and locked the doors. "She's in shock," he said quietly. "We need to get her somewhere safe." Lana nodded. "Station first, then we figure out the rest." But as she turned to start the engine, Charlotte's hand slapped against the glass. Her lips moved quickly. "Don't." Lana frowned, rolling the window down slightly. "What is it, sweetheart?" Charlotte's eyes darted to the tree line. Her voice was a whisper. "They're watching." Lana froze. Crowley turned. His flashlight swept across the trees. And there, between the pines, eyes glimmered. Dozens of them. Silent figures stood in the shadows, their outlines tall and still, their faces obscured, watching. Crowley swore, "We've got company." The figures didn't move, didn't advance. They simply stood there, as if waiting. Lana's chest tightened. "Get in the car." They peeled out of the field, the headlights catching glimpses of faces. Men and women, some familiar, some strangers. Townsfolk, farmers, churchgoers, all standing like sentinels, watching them flee. Charlotte sobbed in the back seat, curling into herself. "You can't stop it. Nobody ever stops it." Lana's hands gripped the wheel. "We'll see about that." Back at the station, Charlotte sat wrapped in a blanket, sipping from a paper cup of water. Her hands trembled so violently that droplets spilled across the floor. Lana crouched in front of her. "Charlotte, listen to me. You're safe here. But I need you to tell me what happened. Who took you?" The girl's eyes darted to the corners of the room, as if she expected someone to step out of the shadows. They wore masks, old, white masks, like faces carved from wood. They didn't talk much, just prayed. Lana's stomach turned. "Prayed to who?" Charlotte shook her head. "Not who, what?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The lake." Crowley leaned against the wall, his arms crossed. "Figures." Lana kept her voice gentle. "Did you see anyone you recognized? Anyone without a mask?" Charlotte hesitated. Her lip quivered. Finally, she nodded. "Who?" Her eyes filled with tears. "My teacher, Mr. Holloway." The words dropped like a stone in the room. Lana sat back, bile rising in her throat. Crowley swore under his breath. "And he's probably still teaching the other kids." Lana's jaw tightened. "Not anymore." They pulled Holloway's file within the hour. Nothing suspicious on paper. Long record of employment, community involvement, glowing reviews. A model citizen. But Lana had learned long ago that Holstead County's sins never made it into the paperwork. "We pick him up," she said. "Tonight." Crowley frowned. "If he's part of it, he won't talk. He's had decades to practice silence. Then we'll make him." But when they reached his house, the lights were off, the mailbox stuffed. The neighbors hadn't seen him all day. Inside, the house was immaculate, too immaculate. Dishes stacked perfectly, photos aligned on the mantel, a teacup still steaming on the counter, and on the kitchen table, a note. In neat handwriting, only 4 words, 6 remain. Tick-tock. Charlotte refused to sleep that night. She clutched the blanket tighter, her eyes glued to the window. Every car that passed, every creak of the old station walls made her flinch. They won't stop, she whispered. They'll come for me again. Lana knelt beside her, brushing hair from her face. Not while I'm here, not while we're fighting. But in her heart, doubt clawed. Because the Covenant hadn't even tried to hide their presence, they'd stood in the open field, unmasked in the dark, daring her to come after them. This wasn't fear, it was confidence. At dawn, Crowley stormed into her office, clutching another file. His face was ashen. You need to see this. He dropped it on her desk. It was a missing persons report, dated just last night. Grace Miller, 10 years old, vanished on her walk home from school. The second offering had already been taken, and this time there had been no photo, no message, just silence. The Covenant didn't need to taunt them anymore. They were ahead. The Miller family's farmhouse sat on the outskirts of Holstead County, its porch sagging with age, the cornfields beyond stretching endless into the morning mist. Grace's mother clutched Lana's hand as if it were a lifeline. She never came home. She always comes home, Sheriff. Always. Please. Her voice broke, collapsing into sobs. Lana promised her what she had promised too many parents before. We'll find her. But the words felt brittle, hollow. Inside the house, Grace's room was untouched, the pink curtains drawn, a dollhouse in the corner, books stacked neatly by her bed, a backpack left on the chair, zipper half open, as if she had dropped it there only hours ago. Crowley examined the windowsill. His flashlight revealed faint grooves in the paint. Someone forced it. Lana's throat tightened. They didn't even wait. They took her straight from home. Crowley turned. They're escalating. Back at the station, Lana pinned Grace's photo on the board beside the others. 7 children now stared back at her, eyes frozen in time, a silent chorus demanding justice. Charlotte sat nearby, huddled under her blanket, watching in silence. Lana crouched beside her. Charlotte, you said they prayed. Do you remember any words? Anything they said? Charlotte's brow furrowed. She nodded slowly. They kept saying, beneath, beneath, the offering breathes, over and over, like a song. Crowley leaned closer. Beneath, that's not just a prayer, that's a location. Lana met his eyes. You're thinking tunnels? Or worse. Holstead had a history of basements, cellars, and caves carved into its soil. Miners had once clawed deep into the ground, and Prohibition had left miles of secret passageways behind. If the Covenant wanted secrecy, beneath was the perfect place to vanish. Crowley pulled maps from the archives, spreading them across Lana's desk. There, the old church, burned down in 1912, but the foundation's still there. Lana frowned. You're saying they rebuilt under it? Or never left it? Night fell heavy as they drove to the ruins of St. Bartholomew's. Only a crumbled stone wall and a charred wooden cross remained, half swallowed by weeds. Flashlights cut across the field. Owls hooted. The air reeked of damp earth. Crowley found it first, a trapdoor buried under tangled vines and soil. Its iron handle rusted but intact. Beneath, he whispered. Together, they heaved it open. A gust of stale air rose, thick with mold and something metallic. Blood, maybe. Lana's skin prickled. Let's move. They descended into darkness, flashlights trembling against stone walls. Steps led into a vast chamber, larger than any cellar should be. Symbols covered the walls, circles, triangles, crude drawings of figures kneeling before a lake. Candles flickered on stone altars, and at the center, rows of wooden pews. A chapel, carved into the earth. The sound reached them then, a chant, low, unbroken, words that didn't belong to any church Lana knew. They pressed deeper, following the echoes. Through a stone archway, they found them. Dozens of figures knelt before an altar, their faces hidden by white wooden masks. In their hands, candles flickered, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. And on the altar itself, Lana's heart stopped. A small shoe, pink, mud-stained, Grace's. Lana's grip on her weapon tightened. Every instinct screamed to rush forward, but Crowley's hand shot out, holding her back. Not yet, he hissed. Look. At the front of the congregation, a man lifted his mask. Lana's breath caught. Pastor Whitlock, the same man who had married couples, baptized children, preached every Sunday for decades. His voice rang out clear. The offering is nearly complete. The circle will close. Holstead will be spared. The congregation murmured in reply. Spared. Lana's stomach churned. Spared from what? Whitlock raised a hand. Tonight we bring Grace Miller to the water. Tonight we honor the covenant made by our fathers. Gasps of reverence rippled through the crowd. And then Lana saw her, Grace, bound, gagged, her small frame carried forward by two masked figures. She thrashed weakly, muffled cries echoing. Lana's vision tunneled. She had seconds to decide. She leaned close to Crowley. We move now. His jaw clenched. If we do, we're outnumbered 50-2. I don't care. Then we make it count. Together, they step from the shadows, weapons raised. Holstead Sheriff's Department. Lana's voice cracked like thunder. Drop her, now. The chant faltered. Dozens of masked heads turned. Candles flickered. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Whitlock smiled. Calm, cold. Children of the covenant, he said softly. They've come to witness. The congregation rose as one. Masks turned, candles lifted, and in the sudden roar of movement, Lana realized too late. They weren't scattering. They were surrounding. Crowley fired first, a warning shot into the air. The boom echoed through the chamber. Back off, he shouted. But the figures didn't flinch. Instead, their chant resumed, louder now, rhythmic, pulsing. Beneath, the offering breathes. The sound pressed against Lana's skull, vibrating through her bones. Grace screamed against her gag. Lana surged forward, shoving past two masked figures, tearing the girl from their grip. She slashed the ropes with her knife, pulling Grace tight against her chest. Run, she shouted. Crowley covered them, his gun sweeping, his flashlight blinding the crowd. But as they reached the tunnel's mouth, the trapdoor slammed shut above them. A heavy iron lock clanged into place. They were sealed in. Lana's heart thundered. She spun, flashlight slicing through the dark. The congregation advanced, filling the chamber with their chant, their masks glowing pale in the candlelight. Whitlock raised his hands. The offering is doubled tonight, he declared. Blood for blood. Crowley cocked his weapon, jaw set. You'll have to take it the hard way. And then the ground trembled. The stone floor beneath the altar cracked. Water seeped upward, black and thick, rippling with unnatural light. The congregation dropped to their knees, arms outstretched, voices rising in ecstasy. And Lana, clutching Grace, realized the lake wasn't outside. It was beneath them, and it was waking. The stone chamber trembled as the black water surged upward, spreading across the floor in rivulets that snaked between the congregation's knees. The voices of the masked worshippers rose in a fevered chant. Beneath, the offering breathes. Lana clutched Grace tighter, shielding the trembling girl against her chest. Her flashlight beam quivered across the altar, catching the grotesque reflection of water that seemed to pulse like a living thing. Beside her, Crowley stood with his weapon raised, his jaw tight. Sheriff, he muttered, this isn't just a cult ritual. They believe something's down here, and if I'm not mistaken, it's waking up. Whitlock's voice boomed across the chamber. You are too late, Sheriff Whitaker. For 40 years, we have honored the pact. The children vanished, not to die, but to save us. To keep Holstead safe from what sleeps beneath the lake. And tonight, his eyes gleamed. Tonight, the circle closes. Lana's chest burned with rage. You murdered them. Don't you dare call it sacrifice. You butchered children. Whitlock's smile twisted. Better them than all of Holstead. That's what you don't understand. The offering protects us. Without it, the lake swallows everything. Crowley stepped forward, voice sharp. Then why hide? Why bury a bus and carve out a chapel in the dirt if your cause is so righteous? For the first time, Whitlock faltered. His eyes darted to the water now lapping at his feet. Because the offering doesn't forgive, it only demands. The congregation swayed, masks bobbing, voices unbroken. The sound rose higher, vibrating the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling, and then Lana saw it, shapes in the water. Small, pale hands pressing against the surface from beneath. Dozens of them, children's hands. Her stomach turned ice. Charlotte had said they prayed. She hadn't said they drowned. The realization tore through Lana with savage clarity. The children weren't taken away. They were kept here, beneath. Grace whimpered, her small fingers digging into Lana's sleeve. No more, Lana whispered. Not again. She raised her gun, aiming at Whitlock. "It ends tonight." The pastor spread his arms, fearless, as though inviting the bullet. "You can kill me, Sheriff, but you can't kill what waits below." Crowley's eyes flicked to Lana's. They both knew he was right. Shooting Whitlock wouldn't stop what had been set in motion, but maybe destroying the covenant itself would. Lana's mind raced. Fire, stone, collapse the chamber, bury it all. She scanned the walls, cracks already spiderwebbed through the foundation. If they could bring the roof down, maybe they could seal the ritual forever. "Crowley," she hissed, "the supports, we take them out." He nodded once. They moved fast. Crowley fired into the wooden beams holding the tunnel's arch. Splinters rained down, the roar echoing. Lana shoved Grace toward the back corner, shielding her from falling stone. The congregation erupted in chaos. Some screamed, some surged forward, hands outstretched, desperate to protect their sacred ground. Lana struck one mask with the butt of her pistol, sending the figure sprawling. Another grabbed her arm. She kicked him hard, tearing free. Crowley shouted over the cacophony, "It's giving way." The roof cracked. Stone slabs fell, smashing pews. Dust filled the air, choking, blinding. Through the haze, Whitlock's voice rose like thunder. "You cannot silence what has already awakened." And then it came. The water at the altar burst upward, a geyser of blackness, and from its surface rose shapes, small, translucent, writhing. Children, or what was left of them. Their faces twisted, mouths open in endless screams. Their eyes glowed faint, unearthly white. The lost students of 1986. Lana's knees buckled. Oh God. The apparitions clawed at the air, reaching for the congregation. The masked figures wailed, some falling prostrate, others scrambling in terror. Whitlock stretched out his arms. Take me as you took them." The ghostly children swarmed him. He shrieked, his body contorting as the water swallowed him whole. Lana seized Grace and ran, Crowley at her side. Stones crashed around them as they sprinted toward the trapdoor. Above, the lock rattled. Someone was forcing it open. The hatch burst wide, moonlight spilling into the chamber. A hand reached down. "Charlotte, come on," she screamed. Lana shoved Grace upward, then scrambled after. Crowley was last, hauling himself into the night as the chapel collapsed in a deafening roar. The ground shook. The trapdoor caved inward, vanishing into a sinkhole that swallowed the ruins of St. Bartholomew's whole. And then, silence. Only the sound of the wind in the trees. They collapsed on the grass, coughing, gasping, covered in dust and ash. Grace sobbed in her mother's arms. Charlotte clutched Lana's hand, eyes wide with terror. Crowley sat back, chest heaving. It's done. But Lana couldn't shake the image of those hands beneath the water. The children, the way they had clawed upward, not to attack, but to escape. She stared at the ground where the church had been. No, it wasn't done. 2 days later, the town gathered for a press conference. Lana stood before microphones, her voice steady, as she announced the truth. The covenant was broken. The missing children's fate uncovered. Justice would be served, even if the perpetrators were ashes beneath the earth. The parents wept. Some embraced. Others simply stared into the distance, grief too old to cry out loud. Holstead Ridge Elementary would finally hang a memorial plaque. But deep inside, Lana knew memorials meant nothing if the lake still breathed. That night, unable to sleep, she drove alone to Morning Lake. The water lay still, silver under the moon. She stood at the shore, her reflection rippling. And then she heard it, a sound, a soft, rhythmic knocking from beneath the water, like small fists against glass. She froze. The ripples spread outward, gentle at first, then faster. A pale hand broke the surface, reaching skyward, then another, and another. Lana stumbled back, her breath caught in her throat. The offering wasn't over. The children were still down there, and they were still trying to get out. If this chilling journey shook you, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so these hidden stories